Hello everyone. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and let's go.
In this case, the betrayal did not just come from one person. It was an organized deception, hiding behind a mask of shared values and calculated silence. Let's analyze the subtle behavioral shifts and the one oversight that exposed a double life. Most men would never suspect until it was too late. Listen, I've spent the last 15 years thinking I was the luckiest man in Savannah. I'm 48 years old, and for more than a decade, I've owned a butcher shop called The Chopping Block. I built that place from the dirt up. I remember the day I signed the loan papers at the bank. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the pen. It was a massive risk, the kind of debt that keeps you awake at night staring at the ceiling fan. But I made it work. I put in 80-hour weeks, standing on concrete floors until my knees felt like they were filled with glass. Now, people drive from 3 different counties just for my dry-aged ribeyes and the smoked brisket I prep every Friday. I'm a simple man. I believe in honest work, fair prices, and looking a person in the eye when you shake their hand. That's how I was raised. I married Megan when I was 33. She was 28 then, a Southern belle with hair the color of Georgia honey and a smile that made you forget your own name. Her father, David, owned a local hardware store, and her mother, Claire, was the head of the hospitality committee at the Baptist church. They were the gold standard of Savannah families. Solid, God-fearing, respectable. Or so I thought for 15 years. Everything started to slide sideways on a Tuesday morning in late March. The humidity was already thick enough to wear, and I was in the back of the shop, prepping a massive order for a high-end catering gig. Megan walked in, and I knew that look immediately. It's the look a wife gives you when she's already bought the ticket, but wants to make sure you think it was your idea. "Sam, honey," she said. She was leaning against the stainless steel table, looking a little too put together for 10 in the morning. "What's on your mind, Meg?" I asked, not looking up. I was busy working. "Mom and I were talking. She's been so stressed lately with Dad's heart condition acting up. We were thinking about taking a little girls' trip together." I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. "Where to?" "Oh, just a spiritual retreat down in Florida," she said. She started fiddling with her wedding ring, spinning it around her finger. She always did that when she was hiding something. Just a week or so of meditation, beach time, and finding some inner peace. You know Claire. She needs to recharge her batteries so she can keep taking care of Dad. "Florida, huh?" I said. I wiped my hands on my apron. Something about the way she said spiritual retreat felt off. Megan was not exactly the type to sit in a circle and hum. She liked her Nordstrom trips and her Chardonnay. "Just 10 days, tops," she continued. Her eyes would not meet mine. "We found this little place near Clearwater. It's quiet, no distractions. Claire really needs this, Sam. She's been crying every night because she's so worried about David's blood pressure." Now that part made sense. David had been struggling. The hardware business was getting hammered by the big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's, and the stress was eating him alive. He looked 20 years older than he was. If Claire was losing it, maybe a trip was a good idea. "Sure," I said. "Go ahead. Take the time. I'll hold down the fort." The relief on her face was so sharp, it was almost a physical thing. She bounced over, kissed my cheek, and told me I was the best husband in the world. But as she walked out the door, my gut felt like it had been punched. It was not a logic thing. It was that instinct you get when you've been in business for a long time. You can tell when a supplier is lying about the quality of the cattle, and I could tell my wife was lying about that trip. The house felt dead while they were gone. I worked extra hours at the shop just to avoid the silence. David came by a couple of times, looking like a ghost. He said Claire had told him the same story, that she was going away to pray and find strength to be a better wife for him. We sat on my porch, drinking sweet tea and not saying much. He looked broken, and I felt a weird sense of dread watching him. They came back on a Sunday afternoon. I was out in the garage, cleaning some equipment, when I heard David's Ford F-150 pull into the driveway. I watched through the window. Megan and Claire got out of the truck, and they did not look like they'd been praying. They looked tan, expensive, and they were whispering to each other like a couple of teenagers who'd just snuck out of the house. When Megan came inside, she gave me a hug, but she felt stiff, like she was holding her breath. "How was Florida?" I asked. "Life-changing," she said. She pulled away quickly. "We both feel like new women. The resort was amazing. So much clarity." Claire was standing in the kitchen, looking nervous. She kept glancing at Megan for cues. "Sam, thank you for letting her go," Claire said. "It was exactly what we needed." I just nodded, but I was watching Megan. She was gripping her purse like it contained state secrets. And then she dropped the bomb. "Actually, Sam, Mom and I were thinking we should probably see a doctor tomorrow. Just a quick checkup." I frowned. "Why? You said you feel like new women." "Oh, we do," Claire jumped in. "But traveling is stressful on the body. We just want to do some routine blood work. Make sure everything is perfect. You know how it is. Better safe than sorry." "What kind of doctor?" I asked. Megan shifted her weight. "Just our regular GP. It's no big deal, Sam. Seriously. Probably just a woman thing. You'd be bored to death if you came along." They both laughed, but it was hollow. It was the sound of a bad actress trying to hit a high note. In 15 years, I'd never known Megan to volunteer for a doctor's visit. I usually had to bribe her just to get her flu shot. Something was very wrong. I looked at David, who was standing by the door. He looked confused, but he was nodding along because he wanted to believe his wife was okay. That night, I could not sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to Megan's breathing. She was 10 inches away from me, but she felt like she was in another zip code. My gut was screaming at me. And in my world, when your gut screams, you listen. The next morning, the heat was already rising off the pavement. I went to the shop, but I could not focus. My mind was back at the house, or rather, at that doctor's office. About 11 in the morning, I decided I'd had enough. I told my lead assistant I had an emergency and left. I did not go to the doctor's office. I went home. I do not know why, but I felt like I needed to be in the house alone. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, just staring at the wall. And then I saw it. Megan's old iPad was sitting on the charging station in the den. She'd upgraded to a new one a few months ago, and usually let the kids play on this one when they came over. But mostly, it just sat there. I picked it up. I do not know what I was looking for. Maybe just a sign that I was being a paranoid jerk. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong so bad. I swiped the screen. It was not locked. I started looking through the photos. Nothing. Just pictures of the dog and some recipes. But then, an alert popped up at the top of the screen. A notification from a messaging app I'd never seen before. It was a little blue icon. The message read, "Our little secrets are already growing inside you. Cannot wait to see you again." The sender's name was just 2 letters, LW. My heart started thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I tapped the notification. It took me into a chat history that went back 6 months. I started scrolling, and the world began to tilt. It wasn't just Megan. Claire was in the chat too. It was a group thread. This guy, LW, was calling them his chosen ones. He was talking about manifesting a new reality and breaking free from the shackles of mediocre men. He was a smooth talker, using all this pseudo-spiritual garbage to tell them how special they were. And then I saw the photos. They were not from Clearwater, Florida. There were dozens of pictures of Megan and Claire in a high-rise suite in Las Vegas. They were wearing dresses I'd never seen, holding glasses of expensive champagne, and they were not alone. There was a man with them, tall, silver hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck. He had his arms around both of them. I kept scrolling, my stomach turning over. The messages got darker. They were talking about the next phase. This LW guy was telling them that the universe had blessed them with his seed. He said it was a sign that they were meant to be a family, all four of them. 4 of them. Megan, Claire, LW, and the children they were both carrying. I felt like I was going to throw up. I sat there in the silence of my living room, the iPad trembling in my hands. My wife, my mother-in-law, the same man. I looked at the dates. They'd been talking to him for months. While I was at the shop, covered in blood and sawdust to pay for our mortgage, she was on her phone planning a new life with a cult leader in a Vegas penthouse. And Claire, who was supposed to be the moral compass of the family, was right there with her. I heard a noise outside. It was a truck. I looked out the window and saw David's Ford pull into the driveway. He got out slowly. His shoulders slumped. He looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. I walked out to the porch. He saw me and stopped. "Sam? What are you doing home? Shop okay?" "No, David," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from a mile away. "The shop is fine, but nothing else is." He looked at me, and I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew. Deep down, he'd known just like I had. "What did you find?" he whispered. I did not say anything. I just handed him the iPad. I watched his face as he scrolled through the messages and the photos. I watched him go from confused to horrified to absolutely destroyed. He collapsed into one of the wicker chairs on the porch, the iPad sliding out of his hands onto the rug. "Same man," David choked out. "Both of them. My wife, Sam, and my daughter." "I know," I said. I felt a coldness settling over me. The pain was there, buried deep, but on top of it was a layer of ice. This was not just a mistake. This was a calculated, long-term betrayal. They had not just cheated. They had replaced us while we were still standing right in front of them. "What are we going to do?" David asked. He looked at me like I was his only lifeline. He was 62 years old, and his entire world had just been nuked. "We're going to be smart, David," I said. I stood up and looked out at the street. Savannah looked the same as it always did. The moss was hanging from the trees. The neighbors were mowing their lawns. But my life was over. The one I'd known, anyway. We're not going to scream. We're not going to cry. We're going to wait for them to come home from their appointment. And then we're going to end this. David and I sat on that porch for 3 hours. We did not talk much. Every now and then, he'd let out a ragged breath or rub his chest where his heart was acting up. I just stared at the iPad. I started digging deeper into the cloud storage. I found a folder. It was labeled Florida 2026. I opened it. It was not pictures. It was documents. scanned copies of bank statements from an account I did not know existed. Megan had been funneling money out of our joint savings for nearly a year. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, but in the last 3 months it had ramped up. She'd cleared out over $15,000. There were also emails, flight itineraries to Las Vegas, reservations at the Wynn, and a receipt for a private consultation and spiritual alignment with someone named Lucas Weber. Cost? $5,000. "He's a con artist, David," I said, showing him the screen. "This Lucas Weber guy, he's not a guru. He's a professional predator." "She used my credit card for the hotel," David whispered, looking at a receipt I'd found. "She told me it was for a new lawnmower for the church. I never even checked the statement. I trusted her." The betrayal was total. It was not just the physical act. It was the financial ruin and the mockery of our trust. They'd treated us like ATMs while they were auditioning for a spot in this guy's harem. Around 4:30 p.m., Megan Suve pulled into the driveway. Claire was in the passenger seat. They were laughing as they got out of the car, carrying bags from Whole Foods. They looked like they had had a great day. They walked up the stairs, and their laughter died the second they saw David and me sitting there. The silence on that porch was so thick you could have sliced it with a steak knife. "Sam? David?" Megan said, her voice going up an octave. "What are you guys doing sitting out here in the heat?" "Waiting for you," I said. I did not move. I just sat there, the iPad face down on my lap. "How was the doctor?" David asked. His voice was shaking, but he was holding it together. Claire stepped forward, putting on her church secretary face. "Oh, it was fine. Routine stuff. Like we said, the doctor says we're both healthy as horses." "That's funny," I said. I stood up slowly. "Because I was looking at your iPad, Megan, and I found some interesting stuff about your health. And your trip to Florida." Megan's face went white. Not just pale, white as a sheet of paper. She looked at the iPad in my hand and then at Claire. "Sam, you should not have been snooping through my things. That's private." "Private?" I barked. I could not help it. The ice was starting to crack. "You spent $15,000 of our money to go to Vegas and get knocked up by a cult leader, and you want to talk to me about privacy?" Claire gasped and grabbed the railing. David stood up too. He looked at his wife with a look of pure loathing. "I heard the message, Claire. Our little secrets. You're pregnant. My daughter is pregnant, and it's the same man." The silence came back, even heavier than before. Megan looked like she was trying to find a way to lie, but the evidence was right there. She looked at me, and her face changed. The pretty girl act was gone. In its place was something cold and defiant. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "Now you know. It was not supposed to happen this way, but maybe it's for the best." "For the best?" I was stunned. "Megan, what the hell are you talking about?" "Lucas is a visionary," she said, her voice getting shrill. "He understands things you never will. He sees our potential. He makes us feel alive. Sam, all you ever do is work at that shop and come home smelling like raw meat. You're boring. You're small." "And you, Claire?" David asked, his voice cracking. Was I boring too? Claire would not look at him. She was crying now, but they were not tears of regret. They were tears of frustration. "Lucas told us you'd react this way. He said you'd try to hold us back because you're trapped in the old world." I looked at these two women I had loved and protected, and I realized I did not know them at all. They had been brainwashed by a man who saw two bored, middle-aged women with access to their husbands' bank accounts and saw an easy mark. "Get your things," I said. My voice was quiet now. The anger had gone somewhere else, somewhere deeper. "What?" Megan asked. "You heard me. Get your things, both of you. You want to be with Lucas? Go. Be with him. But you're not spending another night under my roof." "You cannot do that!" Megan shouted. "I have rights! This is my house, too!" "Actually," I said, "the house is in my name, always has been. And David's house? That's his family's land. You think a judge is going to give you a dime after what you've done? You cleared out our savings to fund an affair. That's called dissipation of marital assets, Megan. I've already called a lawyer." I had not, but I was going to the second they were gone. "We're not going anywhere," Claire sobbed. "Oh, yes, you are," David said. He walked over to the door and opened it. "I'm changing the locks tonight. If you're not out in an hour, I'm calling the sheriff's deputy. I'm sure the congregation at the church would love to hear why the head of the hospitality committee is being escorted off her property in handcuffs." That did it. The threat of public shame in Savannah was the only thing that could pierce through their delusion. They spent the next hour throwing clothes into suitcases, screaming at us the whole time. They called us every name in the book. They told us we were losers, that we were old, that Lucas was going to take care of them. I watched them drive away in Megan's SUV. They were headed toward a hotel, I assumed, or maybe straight to Vegas. I did not care. I looked at David. He was sitting on the steps, his head in his hands. "We're not done, David," I said. "What else is there?" he asked. "I want to know who this Lucas guy really is, because I have a feeling spiritual guru is not on his birth certificate." The next morning, I did not go to the shop. I went to see a guy named Jake. Jake runs a small tech repair place over by the docks, but everyone knows he's a wizard with a keyboard. He's the kind of guy who can find a needle in a digital haystack while he's eating a sandwich. I sat in his cramped, cluttered office and told him the story. I showed him the iPad and the name Lucas Weber. "Give me an hour, Sam," Jake said. "Go get some coffee." I walked down to a little diner nearby and sat there, staring at a cup of black coffee I did not want. My life felt like a movie I was watching from the back row. None of it felt real. I kept expecting to wake up and see Megan in the kitchen, making breakfast and asking me about my day. But then I'd remember the messages. I'd remember the way she looked at me on the porch, like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. When I went back to Jake's, he was leaning back in his chair, a grim look on his face. "Your boy is not Lucas Weber," Jake said. "His real name is Lucas Vane, and he's a piece of work. He's been running this spiritual retreat scam for years. He targets women in their late 30s and 40s, usually in stable, long-term marriages. He uses social media to track their interests, then hits them with ads for his enlightenment courses." "Is he rich?" I asked. "On paper? No. He's a ghost. But he's currently married to a woman in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her name is Sandra Vane. They've been married for 12 years, and he has 3 kids with her. According to her Facebook, he's a highly successful traveling consultant who's away on business 3 weeks out of every month." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Does she know? Doubt it. She's posting pictures of their new minivan and talking about their upcoming anniversary trip to Hawaii. Meanwhile, your wife and her mother are convinced he's their new soulmate. Jake handed me a printout. It was an address in Charlotte, a nice suburban house. "There's more," Jake said. Vane has been sued 4 times in civil court for fraud, but he always settles out of court, or the plaintiffs drop the case. usually because they're too embarrassed to let their husbands know they got scammed out of their life savings. "He picked the wrong husband this time," I said. I called David. I told him what I'd found. "I'm going to Charlotte," I said. "I'm coming with you," David replied. His voice was stronger than it had been the night before. I want to see the look on his face when his world collapses. The drive to Charlotte took about 4 hours. We did not talk much. We just listened to the hum of the tires on the interstate. We were two men on a mission, and for the first time in 48 hours, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. We found the house in a cul-de-sac. It was a beautiful 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn. There was a swing set in the backyard. It looked like the definition of the American dream. I parked the truck and we walked up to the door. I rang the bell. A woman answered. She was in her early 40s, wearing a Charlotte Hornets t-shirt and holding a toddler. She looked tired, but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Mrs. Vane?" I said. "My name is Sam. This is David. We're from Savannah." She looked confused. "Do I know you? Is Lucas okay? He's in Chicago for a conference right now." "He's not in Chicago, ma'am," I said. "And we need to talk to you. It's about your husband and my wife." She let us in. We sat in her living room, surrounded by family photos and kids' toys. It felt like a crime scene. I showed her the iPad. I showed her the photos of Lucas in Vegas with Megan and Claire. I showed her the messages about the pregnancies. I watched the light go out of her eyes. I watched her world crumble, just like mine had. She did not scream. She just sat there, holding her child, her face frozen in a mask of shock. He told me he was working on a huge contract," she whispered. "He said the money from these retreats was going to pay for the kids' college fund." "The money is coming from men like us, Sandra," I said gently. "He's been stealing from our families to fund his life here, and he's been lying to you every step of the way. He's a serial predator," David added, "and he's got 2 more children on the way in Savannah. He's not going to stop." Sandra looked at the photo of Lucas with his arms around my wife. A slow, hot anger began to replace the shock. "He's coming home tonight," she said. "He thinks I'm making lasagna." "Good," I said. "We'll wait." We sat in that house for 3 hours. Sandra called her brother, who was a lawyer. She called a locksmith. She was done. When Lucas Vane pulled his Lexus into the driveway at 7:30 p.m., he had no idea he was driving into an ambush. He walked through the door, calling out a greeting. He stopped dead when he saw David and me sitting on his sofa. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. He tried to play it cool, but I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes when he saw the iPad on the coffee table. "I'm Sam," I said, standing up. "I believe you know my wife, Megan, and her mother, Claire." Vane tried to turn and run, but David was already at the door. David might be 62, but he spent his life hauling lumber and hardware. He grabbed Vane by the collar and shoved him back into the room. "You're a dead man, Vane," David growled. "Look, I do not know what you think you saw," Vane started, his voice smooth and oily. "Shut up," Sandra said. She walked out of the kitchen, her eyes red but her voice steady. "I've seen everything, Lucas. The photos, the messages, the money you've been stealing." Vane looked at her, then at us. The mask of the spiritual guru slipped, revealing a small, pathetic man who was finally cornered. "It was just business," he stammered. "They were willing participants. I did not force them to do anything." "You conned them," I said. I stepped close to him. I could smell his expensive cologne. It made my skin crawl. You used their insecurities to rob them, and you left a trail of wreckage behind you. But here's the kicker, Lucas. I've already sent all of Jake's files to the FBI and the IRS. Turns out, you have not been paying taxes on all that spiritual income, and bigamy is still a felony in North Carolina. Vane's face went gray. You're bluffing. Try me, I said. We stayed just long enough to see the police arrive. Sandra had called them the second he walked in, reporting a domestic disturbance and fraud. As they let him out in handcuffs, he looked small. He did not look like a visionary. He looked like a rat caught in a trap. The drive back to Savannah was long, but the air felt cleaner. When I got home, the house was empty. Megan had come back and cleared out the rest of her things. There was a note on the table, blaming me for everything. I did not even read it. I just crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I kept the house and the shop. Megan and Claire moved to Atlanta, trying to start over. Last I heard, they were struggling. Lucas Vane was in federal prison, and his assets had been frozen. There was no spiritual guru coming to save them. They were alone with the consequences of their choices. I'm a different man now. I still work hard at the shop, but I do not stay until midnight anymore. I go home. I sit on my porch, and sometimes a woman named Rachel comes over. She's a school teacher, honest and kind. We talk about real things, no spiritual alignments, just life. Sometimes you have to break everything down to the bone to see what's really there. My old life was a lie. My new one? It's real. And that's enough for me. The primary failure here was not a lack of love, but a refusal to acknowledge that even the longest-standing institutions can be compromised by external manipulation. Our protagonist's biggest mistake was dismissing his gut instinct as paranoia, allowing a parasitic influence to drain his legacy from the inside out. First, never ignore a sudden change in financial patterns or a newfound obsession with privacy under the guise of personal growth. Second, remember that ironclad legal protection, like individual property titles and separate digital footprints, is your only true defense when emotions cloud judgment. And third, once the mask falls, act with cold, surgical precision rather than raw emotion. It's the only way to preserve your future. How would you have handled a betrayal that involved your entire inner circle? Share your perspective in the comments below and subscribe for more honest, tactical breakdowns of real-world cases.